Aloha. Is our future predetermined? Is there only one story that is possible in any given person's life, any generation's life? Is everything that is happening right now and everything that's going to happen just an extension of the future, extension of the past? That's the inquiry of this episode. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Horizon Story. Yeah, in the Eastern traditions, that there is a concept called karma. And many people, especially people who are just reading about the concept, think about karma as being, well, it's all the things that happened in the past and basically, that's what you have to live with. But I learned about karma differently from my teacher. And the way he described it is that karma is the habit energy of all the things that happened in the past, which is different than just the accumulation of all the things. It's that if your people went through periods in which they were in warfare, or they went through periods in which they were in celebration, or they had momentous things that occurred, or they lived a boring life, whatever the case might be, that generations after generations, along with everything else that was happening in the world, through those generations, as they impacted the people who are your people, that all of that just creates energy over time. And that's what comes to you. The energy and the habits of that energy, the way in which people became accustomed to it, became used to it. And so there's this part about what then is karma and how does it impact us right now? And from what it is that I've learned about karma, how I've come to know it, it's that it is the habit energy that you are born with, that accumulated before you were born. But what happens after that is not a predetermination by any of that. You're not born in a way in which it's like, okay, guaranteed, this is the way your life is going to extend, because that's the way that your parents' life extended, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, all the way before, all before the migration, and before that, and before that, and before that. If that were the case, then everything would be static. Nothing actually would change. And that obviously is not true. It's just not true. So the question is, how do we move from a more active state of karma to karma as a fate, right? As a fate. Because there's no doubt that all those things that happened actually impact us today. But so do the stories. What are the stories that we have in our head, in our heart, that tell us how it is we should act today, what it is we should do, how we should be? There's that instinctual part where it's the story and the karma, and then there's like the grievances that we might have, either as individuals or as groups of people. And we may be inclined to not take anything on the chin, right? Not to take anything without fighting back. That might be like built into us. You know, my sister and I have a cousin, and who didn't grow up in, the advocacy movements or anything of that sort. But now he and his partner find themselves on most days getting up, packing their backpack with water, a flask of milk in case of pepper spray or something else. And they have their whistle, and they have their little bit of instruction in terms of who to call or who to tell other people to call. They have their phone and an extra battery pack so they can be in communication, and and their energy bar, and that's how they spend their day. They have chosen to spend the days in which they have retired from work essentially out on the streets in companionship with people. That's basically what they intend to do. And so it's like they are doubling down in many ways. And they're doing it every morning and coming home every night. And they're writing exhilarating texts and posts to my sister about the adventures of their lives and how it is that they feel like this was the moment that they were born for. That entirety of their life was born for this, and that they were lucky in life. They're lucky in life to find themselves to be people who are, considered in this country to be people of color, meaning they're not white. But they were lucky to be people who did not actually suffer from a lot of discrimination in their life and who had gains in their life. They had professions, they had good incomes, they owned the house that they live in. And they feel lucky about that. And they feel upset about other people who have other situations that are coming upon them just because of their identity, or whether they have this kind of paper rather than that kind of paper. Or they might have the right kind of paper, but they're going to get stopped and detained and questioned anyway because of how they look, or maybe the accent that they have. And so it's that part about what you're going to do about the circumstances that actually feed into the stories that we have and what we're going to do about it. So we could also decide that the way that we've always been doing things, that what we're going to do is we're just going to keep doing those things. We're going to keep believing those things. We don't care what anybody else is thinking. And actually, we have a grievance about what other people are thinking. It's like we're coming upon our 250th celebration this year in this country called America. And, it occurs to me that I'm going to have to tell a story about my relationship with this place called America. Can you remind me about that? Okay, just hold on to that thought and remind me. I need to make that point about my relationship with this country. But we could have a story about what the country is about. And no matter what may be happening, whether or not it feels like it's opening up or closing down or changing course, or the decisions that have been made over 30 or 50 or 75 or 100 years are things you agree with. And then you have all the people who the changes that were made over the 30, the 50, the 7,500 years are not what it is that you thought this country was going to be. And now you're people divided, and you're going to stay in your respective corners, and you're going to double down, just double down. And this whole thing, right, where you might have just an ongoing grievance. It could even be within your own family, right? That could be the case. They say that that holiday that in America is called Thanksgiving is the thanks that you give when you pow with the family dinner, because you argued so much over the family dinner that you go, thank goodness, we're pow, we're finished, we're done with this holiday called Thanksgiving. We give thanks that we no longer have to be in the same room with each other because, we can't choose family, but we also can't choose whether family disagrees with you about what you think would be fundamental things. And there you'll be over whatever meal it is that you have, and you'll just be like, like you can't believe it. You can't believe that this is your fill in the blank, your brother, your cousin, your uncle, your auntie, your tutu. You cannot believe that that is what it is that they think. And you just sit there and you just like kind of take it, especially if you're a junior member in cultures where junior members of families, are not supposed to like talk up, let alone talk back. And so you stay in your respective corners without coming to a different understanding. And there's that way in which all of that may mean that you would just try to get along, and you know that things are not going well, but you will hide wherever it is that you can. Just, like, okay, this too will pass. That is the story that you tell yourself. So you leave the dinner, that thing, and you go back to your life. And in the back of your mind, you hear the story that your uncle was telling you, that you gave like a scowl at that moment. But you know that there are pieces of truth in it. But it isn't truth that you want to think about a lot. And you just park it in a corner and you get on with your life. You just get on with it, and you get on with it. Until you reach the day where that is no longer sustainable. Where you get up and you go, I am really tired, but maybe I'm really tired because I am not doing my part. I'm not doing the lift. But what should my lift be? Should it be packing my water and my milk and my whistle and my extra batteries for my phone, and that bandage and, like the towel to wipe my brow? Is that what I should be doing? Should I go and talk to my uncle? Should I ask him why he thinks that way? What are his hopes? What would he want for my children? Maybe too late for me. But what would he want for his grandnieces and his grandnephews? Does he see a different possibility? And maybe look for the opening where I could say what it is that he is saying that rubs me in a inconvenient and hard way, Like, when you get too much sand in your swimsuit, like that. It's like, especially if it's in the bottoms, like not so good, that feeling. And so that notion of, do we sit with the grit in our pants, or do we begin to do something else? All the stories, but also all the choices we have, because the past is not a predeterminate of the present, let alone the future. We have other possibilities if we so choose. Friends, we'll be back to talk about this in as much detail as my guest Ariel Jacobson wants to talk about. And remember, you have to remind me to tell the story. We'll be back. Hello, friends. We're back at the Horizon Story with my friend Ariel. Hi, thanks for coming back.
I'm so happy to be back. And You know, Norma, I am squarely in middle age now, so I think when you said, hold that thought, let me tell a story, I thought, let's do that now because I will forget to ask you to tell that story. So tell us the story of your relationship to this country called America.
Okay. All right. Well, my story is about being a person who lives in a place that, and being of the age in which I was born in the territory of Hawaii. And and then became the state of Hawaii in a time in which I was too young to basically do much about it, right? Okay, so I was born in 1956 and in 1959, right, which is when we became a state. And then there's the part of the story of my migration, which would mean that, as a Native Hawaiian, right, that my peoples would have been here in this place for a very, very long time, from the year 400, to the 1700s. And we would have been here and we would have prospered and we would have fought and we would have celebrated and we would have invented and created. And we had our own governance. And we were right at that stage where we were moving into our own indigenous modernity at the moment that people who were not us came to these shores. Okay? And from then to the point where that upward trajectory was cut off, right? Uh, would mean that there's like a incomplete story that's there, right? It's totally incomplete. It's like it's in lots of ways. It's like the story that is complete for me is that when the Hakka Chinese came to work in the plantations, that they would have found common peoples with the native peoples, right? Which is how I came about, but also how many people in Hawaii came about. We found each other, even if we were not of the same identity, because we had common ways of looking at the place that we were in and wanting to forge our future in this place. Okay? So I've staked my ground, as many people in Hawaii I know have, in particular people who are of Native Hawaiian ancestry, in this place. And we don't mean America. We mean Hawaii. And we mean, if we're talking about our larger territory and obligation, it would be to the people of the Pacific, right? All of the string of islands and all of the peoples who are on the other side of the Pacific, whose ancestors migrated, right, and came to be with us. The Chinese, the Filipinos, or the Okinawans, right, the Japanese, right? We feel that particular bind, right, that usefully binds us. And we feel much closer to that than we do to the country called America. We'd say that, I would say I would have described my relationship not very long ago as being ambivalent, okay? Which would mean that I wouldn't be angry, okay? So I certainly have grown up with people who are angry in their relationship with this thing called America, okay? And we have people who served in the armed forces of the country, okay? And are patriotic to the country, but have as their first allegiance this place called Hawaii, okay? And then you have people like me who essentially are ambivalent, okay? And this is especially so because when I get on a plane and I go from Hawaii to the nearest place in that place called America, which we are a part of, but I cross the pond, and in 5 hours, 5.5 hours, and I land, it feels entirely different. It feels entirely different, right? That's just the nature of how it is that a place that is predominantly a continent, right, would become, and a place that is very much an island, 5 hours away from anywhere, would become. We would, maybe on a map of the country, be the same country, but there would be a different ways in which we would become. Okay, it's just a thing. You could almost describe it as math and science.
Right.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay. So, and this long story, okay, is long because I realized I could no longer be ambivalent. I realized that all the things that are happening in the country called America, that we in Hawaii cannot escape the circumstances, the impacts, right? That all of those types of things, right? What happens in the country will reach our shores, okay? That vast miles of ocean and that many hours of air travel will not keep us isolated from all of that. It will not. And therefore, I have to care, okay? Now, I would say I have to care about this place called America, okay? That doesn't mean in any shape or form, right? That means that there would need to be a relationship that is unconditional, okay? This I understand to be part of the experiment of this country, right? That change will not occur if we are unconditional about how it is that we think about a place, okay? But it's useful not to be angry, because if we are just angry, then we're in that place in our chemistry, right, in our body, where we've compressed all possibility out, and all we can do is just to reflexively fight back, okay? And reflexively fighting back, okay, we essentially become the useful aggressor to people who are hoping for a big fight. Actually hopeful for a big fight, okay? And no one can say, right, whether or not that would mean that on the other side of the fight, that there will be something better, right? So that's my long story about my relationship with this country.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4 other chapters in the of all, but we won't take that up
Yeah.
right now.
Well, I think it's all connected, and it's really interesting that you started this conversation talking about karma as a habit pattern, a habit energy through the expanses of time. And even in the story that you just told, that the place in all its complexity called Hawaii, that there was an incomplete story, yet obviously there's also many threads of that story that were kept alive, very much alive, and continued.
Yes.
And those
Yes.
even that had maybe become more softened over time in terms of how folks could really connect to them and hear them were
Yes.
brought back, right? And so I think there's this question of, with all the influences of this country that we call America, I think about the collection of stories that we're bombarded with on a daily basis, not only that we've inherited from previous generations, but that are being generated on a real-time basis all the time. So what are some of the ways that we can, connect to the stories that do lead us toward a more fruitful place than the one where we're just doubling down in our separate corners?
Yeah, so they're the stories of things that are happening right now or that happened in the past that are hugely inspirational, right? And those are stories that are useful for us to hear about, read about, spread about, right? And then there's also the story that is not yet written, okay? And I believe, right, that we're in a moment where there's a lot of potency around the story that is not yet written. If, okay, we just don't find ourselves like in a, well, this too shall pass, or no, it will not pass, and I'll fight until we've overcome everybody and everything, okay? If we're not in those two, basic tracks around who it is we believe we are, and the stories that are going to animate us on a daily basis. Or in the case of when you drift, the fact that you have no story animating you. Okay, all right, which to me is among the most difficult things to overcome, right? It means that you're not paying attention to what's going on, and there's a part of you that has decided not to care. Okay, and to me that is among the most difficult thing to overcome, right? But in all of this, right, it's like, what is a story that has not yet been written about who we are and who we might become? Okay, and in this case, right, I certainly have felt for the entirety of my life the potency of who it is the people in Hawaii and the Pacific, right, could become. And having actually not been totally extinguished by those who had a desire to possess us, right? Okay. I remember at one point, so Naaleho used to go to like these estate, I don't know if he does that now. We'll ask him when he comes on. He used to go to these estate sales to look for things that might be useful, to be part of what he might put like on a table when he's shooting something like this.
Something that Auntie just had on the shelf.
Yeah,
but then
Auntie had on
it
the
was
shelf and all that other type of stuff. And I remember he had just come back from one and he showed it to me. It was a tabletop book. One of those big books with lots of pictures and not too many words. Okay. And it had a truthful and disturbing title. Okay. It talked about Hawaii, the latest possession
Oof.
of the United States of America. Right? The latest possession. To understand that the place you live and that maybe you too may be thought of as just being something that has been acquired, right? And for it to be proudly put on a tabletop book.
Right, in pictures.
And pictures and all of that type of stuff, right? And all of that, right? And to also know, right, at least in terms of the way that I've come up through the ways that I've lived my life and that I've learned from my teachers, is that even that, not a predetermined conclusion, right? So that may be what some group of people thought, but will we become that is a lot to do with us.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right? And so that whole thing, right? What do you do with that? When you know that some people have a story, not only about themselves, but about you and your place, right? That plays itself out like all the time, right? All over the world, it plays itself out. But this notion of standing in your own collective determination means that you have to write your own story of the future. And then who do you include? What do you say? Right? Will you truly interrupt all the things?
Yeah.
Right? All the things.
I want to come back to that, but before we get to that, because I think we should come back to this question of how you write your own story as individually and as collective peoples. But before we get to that, I want to just kind of tease out a little bit more about what we were saying about the drift. When folks are maybe a little adrift, disconnected from this sense of, I think really what it is a sense of possibility and a connection to our own agency to create that future.
Right.
But who can blame us? I mean,
Sure,
there's a lot of shit has not been going all that great for a long time.
That's
and
right.
so
Yeah.
I think it's really important to think about what are the, even just like daily practices that we can do to kind of connect to that sense of possibility. And what do you, maybe even yourself in your own practices, when you feel that sense of agency maybe getting a little eroded, how do you notice it, and how do you create space for that possibility again?
Well, part of what I do is I bring myself out of leaning into the narratives that I'm attracted to because they're not the narratives I want. You know how you can do that, right? Basically, like you hear like what it is that people are saying and you really disagree. And so what you do is you double down and you listen to it 5 times and then you listen to another 3 people that are talking about that same thing.
Engage in the comment section.
You engage, well, not so much if you have a flip phone, right? And but you're like you get called into like a black hole, right? Around that which you don't want, right? You don't want. Now, you cannot ignore, or you should not ignore. But the question is, am I observing it from a place of agency, or am I getting sucked in, right? Okay. And so literally it's about like when you get sucked in, you literally find yourself like leaning in like this, right? Okay, about to, eat the microphone. And so you basically just want to like pull yourself out into, a posture that is more sustainable, right? That's the deal, okay? Which means there's some strategic disconnection, okay?
Yeah.
Strategic distance, right, from the turmoil of all of that. And how do you know whether you're doing that or whether or not you're getting unusefully disconnected? Is, it's like, okay, I heard that story on the news feed, but I do not need to hear the 40 iterations of that, all the comments, all the analysis, right? All the grievances with respect to X, Y, and Z, right? Okay. So it's like knowing, but not getting sucked in, right? I think that that's really important. Now, the other thing is to exercise every day, right? Not only my curiosity, but a part of my practical doingness around it. Like, okay, I wonder if I pull the weeds out of that section, will it make a difference? Like just change your environment, right? Just change your environment a little bit. Okay, okay, I'm very cheap, but that rubbish container over there, like it's seen its day, and certainly I could get one, even though I am inclined to get a secondhand one. This one is beyond being 450th hand. So let me release it, and let me just put something that is, like that when I look at it, it doesn't always remind me about how things are falling apart. Right? It's like, can you build an environment around you? It doesn't have to be expensive,
right?
But doesn't look like it's about ready to fall apart. Okay, remembering I live in a place where we're counting on the termites holding their nests.
Right, yeah, right.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Okay, all right. So that whole thing, right, about building the future in small increments by improving your situation right now, and even if it's in the tiniest degrees, take that stuff that's moldy out of your refrigerator.
Right.
Right? Just
Good place
just
to
get rid of
start.
just get rid of it right now. Okay. Oh, remind me to tell you a story about that.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh, that's good because I was going to go there later.
Yeah.
But before we go there, I wanted to ask you a little bit about this. What was coming into focus for me when you were talking about kind of leaning into the thing that we don't want to be, was this, maybe it's a habit pattern around defining ourselves in counterpoint to, which I think is another way that we,
Yes.
could unpack
Yes.
this idea of othering and belonging and who we're becoming that is something other than what we are in counterpoint to. And I wanted to in particular ask you about this idea of when we feel, maybe it's in some cases this idea of a possession, right? We feel to be othered in that way, or the other aspect is being invisibilized. I think this is particularly I happen to work in the field of ending sexual and gender-based violence. And I think in that space, there is so much really intense silence around the pervasiveness of this type of harm and violence that people who have experienced it both individually but then also at kind of like a collective level feel this kind of lack of visibility to other humans.
Yes.
And that's a kind of counterpoint in a way too.
It is a counterpoint. And so that this is really like the, can we as people who feel that way be in community with each other in such a way that we build and fill in the hollowness that we have, right? We fill in the hollowness and the worthiness that we have with each other in community, because part of this is about isolation, right? And isolation is a technique. It is a strategy that is used by entities, which might even include countries, that are hoping to have power and control, right? It is basically to isolate you,
Right.
And so the antidote actually is about building that possibility with each other, which, by the way, is among the safest things to do, okay? Right? Until it's bursting at its seams. It's bursting at its seams, right?
Yeah.
And where more and more people can be brought in because you've invited them in rather than having to be the people to wait to be invited in. Okay?
Yeah.
Shall we take that up?
Yeah.
Later on?
Yeah. Let's do that.
All right. Thank you, folks. We'll be right back. Hello, friends. If you have a furrowed brow, you want to take your hand and you want to massage it a little bit. And that'll sort of relax your notion of this understandably difficult subject. Okay? But the whole part of this episode is that our future is not predetermined. We do not have to be the people who drift or the people who just go along with whatever's going on. What that tabletop book said about us being a possession does not have to be so. That is not the case. We can actually tell the story of the future and then live into it. And it's really important to tell it because we essentially are unable to create things unless we have a story. And if we are waiting for other people to make that story up for us, then that removes a lot of our own agency. So we are the people who can do that. I know that for certain. This is not something that I am doubtful about at all. And how do I know that? I know that because every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old in the world has a story, multiple stories to tell. And all their stories have common themes associated with them, that if they were the people who were implementing them, they would have certainty that they would be able to do that. Okay. Now, purple clouds aside, the future that you wish, you can take steps for that today. There's always some small steps that you can take. The people in Maine knew that to be true, and they all gathered together. And over that 25, 30 days, okay, they actuated the story that they hope for their community. And they said, we're not going to wait for 100, 150 years. We're going to begin that today. And the people who are left behind in Detroit said, if we are to be left behind, we are the people who are going to bring life back. Our future is not predetermined as a wasteland that is abandoned. We don't have to be the people that further abandon the land that we feel close to. We can grow vegetables, we can clean up the rubbish, we can call our young people together and we can say, do work with us. We can sing the songs, we can learn the things, we can become community and build from there. So that's the whole point of this moment in which we're talking about like all the things, right? And including the complications about how we might feel about the places that we are in. We may have complicated relationships because they may very well be the places that, although beloved, that they had hard histories. Does that hard history have to be something that continues to play itself out today and into the future? No, not at all. It would take the collective abilities and collective creation and the collective stories and the sweat equity, right? The hard work and the sweat equity to change the course. Okay? But in that, right, know that more than one future is possible. May that future be the one that you're working on right now. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back soon. The Horizon Story podcast is produced by Bryson Ho and Sarah Demarest de Rivera. Hosted and written by me, Norma Wong. Executive producer, Naalehu Anthony. Featuring Ariel Jacobson. For Collective Acceleration, Kelly Miller. For OEV TV, Ken Sato, Wesley Kealoha, Courtney Leong, Jeff Lee, and Ivy Lagabagad. For Pa'akai Communications, Jamila Silver, Diana Han, Pearl Tule, Christine Matsuda. Hair and Makeup by Melody Levy. Mahalo to Kalihi, the land of my birth, ancestors, teachers, collaborators, and friends. Rosie Abrium for the support, and Scott Nine and Taj James for the encouragement. The Horizon Story is brought to you by OEV TV. Copyright by Collective Acceleration. Follow us on social at The Horizon Story. Questions to hello@thehorizonstory.com. Visit us where you find your favorite podcast or at thehorizonstory.com.